Welcome, beautiful mamas. I am your host, Shay Harrison. This podcast is a place for Springfield and local surrounding area mamas to share their stories about life, motherhood, and everything in between, completely judgment-free. I am so excited to be able to share these stories with you and give women an opportunity to be heard. So if you're ready to laugh, open your mind, and be part of a supportive sharing community, let's crack on. Alrighty, hello, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm super excited to be sharing this story bit journey with you. So as always, I will just get you to introduce yourself for our listeners and then we'll crack on with your story.
Perfect, everyone. I am Hana and I am 32 years old. I had to think about that for a moment. Relatively new to Springfield. We moved here in February. We're a defence family.
Oh, really?
Thank you, yes.
My husband and I are both ex-defence.
Oh, my husband's in the Air Force.
Yeah, so were we.
Obviously. And this is our third interstate posting in the last 3 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Fun times.
Yeah.
We have 2 children.
Yep.
Aurelia, who we call Ray, and she's 5.
Yep.
And Toby, who is almost 2.
Oh, cute.
Almost 2.
Cute.
Yes. So that's us. And I am, I guess what I do for work, I'm self-employed. I'm a professional witch, tarot reader, and astrologer.
Which is super, super exciting. We were just discussing this before we started recording. I'm really excited to hear about your journey to getting to this position. I find it so interesting.
Yes, my journey is unique, but not as rare as some people might think.
Yep.
And I urge those with any religious background just to keep an open mind, because religious trauma is real. I do have some. A lot of people have some. But there are some people who are still very happily in the church, and I have nothing against the church whatsoever. Majority of my family is still Christian. But I do not count myself that way anymore. And this is, I guess, a little bit of my pathway to getting there, which some of those movements were forced upon us and some were explored. And then how I got to here, because it's a big shift. It's a huge shift to going into something that is considered wrong and evil and everything unholy from my youth.
Yeah.
So yes, it's very interesting. Did you have any questions before I start, or do you want me to just
No.
jump straight in?
Let's crack on from the beginning.
All right. In the beginning,
I
I was raised in an Assemblies of God church.
Okay.
So that is a Pentecostal church, very evangelical, which means the main gist of the church is to spread the word of God as far and wide as possible.
Yep.
So it's all about, planting churches, missions trips, encouragement to bring people into the church and convert as many people as humanly possible. That is the goal, right? Now, being raised in that, we didn't have a typical relationship with other churches or other denominations of churches. It was very much, instead of just every Sunday, we would go twice on a Sunday morning and Sunday night. Wow. We would have small group, which is a prayer group, on a Wednesday. That would be at a local family's house, either our neighbours, our friends up the road, or at our house. Friday nights, once I was a teenager, was youth group, and then again, Sunday. So that's 4 times a week, at least in my teens.
Yeah.
3 times a week when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
The entirety of Christmas Day was spent at church, putting on a Christmas Day lunch.
Do you get Santa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, someone would dress up as Santa.
Not that I'm like, oh my God, Santa's the be-all of religion, but...
Yeah, we didn't miss out on that. I mean,
yeah.
I think Santa is heavily almost like, not controlled by Christianity, but associated with Christianity.
Yeah.
Right? So...
Christmas Day.
That was kind of my life. The only friends we had were in the church.
Yeah.
The only family friends we had were in the church.
Yeah.
And because we didn't have a lot of family here, my grandparents on my father's side, they are immigrants from Holland. So it was just them and their 2 kids. So that's all we had. And then on my mother's side, very interesting, and it's a story for another day.
Okay.
She found out in her 30s she was adopted.
Oh, in her 30s.
But found out that she was adopted by her grandparents, and her sister was actually her mother, and her parents were actually her grandparents. I know.
Let's get your mum on as well. Let's do it. Let's get everyone on board.
She's local too. She moved up with us.
Oh, that's cute.
But yes, so she has an interesting story. But a lot of her family was either much older or much younger than her. She was kind of the only one in her age group. So it just and they weren't always super close, and we weren't close with them. And being her parents, being grandparents, they died quite early.
Yeah, right.
So we didn't have a lot of family, so the church became our family.
Yes, okay.
My dad was raised in it by his parents. They came over from the Dutch Reformed Church and then found Pentecostal churches. And then my mum she converted into the church, which a lot of people do because something's happened. There might be a trauma that they feel guilt or something like that about, or they want community. Community is a huge draw for the church, right? And when you're in it, the community is everything. And you form these relationships and these bonds with people that they feel, keyword feel, they feel far deeper and richer than anyone else because you share this spiritual belief.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the problem with any church, and this is not all churches, okay? My church in particular was very much about this community aspect. But there were caveats to that. If you don't play by those church rules, then you are either threatened with basically like banishment, exile, or getting kicked out of the church, which is eventually what happened to us. Or they just turn their backs on you, completely ignore you, or there's like a punishment involved, basically. Not like physical punishment, but the punishment is that removal of these friendship connections, these social connections, this community.
Right.
And that's very painful,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So you don't want to lose that. So you make sure you're playing by these rules, regardless what the cost might be to you or your family.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of what happened. So my mom and dad married in the church, had me, dedicated me to the church and said, we will raise her, as a good Christian girl. And I know at that stage when I was probably about 3, my mum was like, I'm not happy in this marriage. It's not a good marriage. We're not a good match. We were probably better as friends.
Okay.
But the pressure was, that's so wrong. You cannot. How could you even think about leaving your husband?
Yeah, okay.
That's not okay. That's, sinful in the eyes of the Lord. You've been married in the church. You have to stay together. You have to work through it. And a lot of the advice that Mum got from her close friends was, oh, you don't think I've thought about that? Oh, you just have to deal with it. You just have to find, something else to put your attention on, or find this or do this. So Mum threw herself into hobbies, of course, and stayed. And then we had my brother, which was great. And she always thinks, she's like, if I didn't stay, I wouldn't have had your brother. Fair. But obviously things were not comfortable. And I don't think they're going to get any better, as most of us know.
Yeah.
That's usually a warning sign. And when you don't listen, those unmet expectations become resentments, and they just drive a wedge. And we didn't realise there is such an act of happy families that happened not only in our family, but since leaving, I've realised how many other families went through it. So just this act, this facade that you put on. And the theme in the church, and it was really, really, really crucial once I got to my teenagehood, right, going into high school, you'd walk into church and people could say things like, didn't you wear that the other week?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, thinking, I like this outfit. Or,
yeah.
I bought this outfit so I could wear it to church. All of my purchases for outfits were for church.
Yeah, okay.
It was the purpose behind every single outfit I bought.
I'm a massive outfit repeater. I always have been. I've had like 3 dresses that I've just worn on cycle.
But it's normal, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's sustainable.
Yes.
So they'd say, didn't you wear that, say, 3 weeks ago? Yeah. Well, that's not very respectful to God, is it?
Is this vibe. People your age?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
This is people my age. People my mum's age would say things like, oh, you're very brave to wear that to church.
Because you've worn it already? Or
no, this was more, it was too girly, or it was an interesting fabric, or she showed her shoulders, and there was no rules around that.
Yeah, right.
But, maybe it showed a little bit of cleavage. It didn't matter really what it was. It was just this like cattiness that went underneath everything.
Yeah.
Little things like that.
People aren't happy.
People aren't happy, and they focus their attentions on other people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it is this appearance of looking good for God.
Yeah, right.
This idea that, as a teen girl, you're married to Jesus until you find your husband.
Oh my God.
I know, it's really cringy.
It is really cringy, but that's just my beliefs. That, it's not for everyone.
I don't think the idea that... I think the purity culture that came along with it was really detrimental to me personally and to a lot of women.
Yeah, okay.
And to men as well. And we had so many young people get married, like really young in the church, to their first boyfriend because that was pressured on them. And as any normal human being with hormones, you want to do things that are not allowed, they're forbidden, they're sinful, and therefore the only option is marriage.
Yeah. And it's also the norm. Like, you've seen your parents do it, you see your friends do it, not a generation, but like an age group just older than yours. So that's just what you perceive as to be, everyone else is doing it, this is just what we do.
Exactly. So, and I don't, personally, I think young marriages, you can't have gone through everything. You kind of experience life enough, and then that in itself can breed regret and unhappiness later on. You need to know who you are before you choose your person. So
some people have that. They have a good awareness from an early age. Some don't,
but not to the level that you see, like the percentage that you see in the church community.
Yeah.
So you'd see people that were pressured into marriages earlier than they really should have been. All of that jazz. The other thing was some of the messages around, the children's pastor at youth group would stand up and they would do things like, pass around a rose and everyone has to smell the rose. And by the time the rose got back up to the pastor, all of the petals were falling off. They were bruised. It didn't look as pretty anymore. This is you if you...
Oh, my God.
Exactly. That sort of an aspect.
That's terrible.
They do the same with a piece of paper. So everyone scrunch the paper up, open it up again, do it. Can we ever get this paper as flat as it was? Yeah. No, it will never be as perfect as it once was.
Yeah, right.
So you can imagine if anyone's been sexually assaulted or, trigger warning raped. Yeah. That is you're going to think, A, no one's ever going to love me now because I've been a crumpled up piece of paper.
Yeah.
They never took that into account.
Yeah.
There are so many ethical violations I can see looking back where, the pastors would take you aside to have a chat. Let's go get a drink and chat together. And they'd talk about things that they were not qualified. They'd never studied counselling, trauma counselling, psychology, any of that. There was no, ethical agreements to keep things to themselves. I have no doubt in my mind they were all keeping notes on each person.
Yeah.
And it's just it's this really weird, I guess, enmeshment of every part of the church. So then if you ever thought about, oh my gosh, what if I don't go to church next week? I'm not feeling it. What is everyone going to think? They're going to think I've backslidden. They're going to think I'm this horrible person. They're going to think this, and it becomes about what people think rather than your spiritual practice or your devotion to God. Now, the type of church that it was, not everyone might be aware of it. They talked a lot about spiritual gifts. So they talked about speaking in tongues. This was an expectation that you had received the Holy Spirit into your life if you could speak in tongues, which is known as glossolalia. It is a way of speaking a different language that you don't know, but it's not a true language. It's like a personal language between you and God. Some people would have the gift where they could interpret this for other people. Some people may have the spiritual gift of healing hands, where they can lay their hands on someone and heal them, which we would see happen. So some people might say it is the power of prayer. Others might say it's the power of suggestion, placebo, those sorts of things. And I don't discount either of those. I think it can be both. But when you see it, it's very hard to deny as well. So that keeps you tied to the church as well. Obviously it's true because this thing has happened.
You saw it with your own eyes. It's not even just rumour.
Exactly. I remember each church session there'd be a call to the altar, which is if you have it in your heart, if you have any sin in your heart and you want to give your heart to Jesus and be saved and ensure you're going to go to heaven.
Like confession?
Not confession. You just had to... It's like personal confession, I guess.
Okay.
You're not having to tell what your sins are.
Okay, then.
But just if you feel like there might be something wanting and you had to give your heart to Jesus in order to get into heaven, that's the crux of it. Come up to the front and we'll pray with you. And so, at the age of 5, I was going out there because I felt so guilty and shameful for all the sin in my life at 5 to go and give my heart to Jesus. And it was congratulated and yay, well done. And so I remember this one time, the first time that I went up there, and you get prayed for and you'd see people falling over. Someone would catch them, but they'd fall over whilst they were praying. So it was like this, they've been moved by the power of Christ. I remember going up there and feeling the pastor pushing on my head as he was praying. And I'm like, is he trying to push me over? And I was like, is that what happens? Maybe that's what happens. And it was just this real confusion of, I know what's expected. Okay, I'll fall down, right? Sometimes people would be shaking, jumping down. It's very strange if you didn't grow up in it to see any of this happen.
Yeah.
This spiritual fervour. It's very, very interesting. And so I was lying there, and even at the age of 5, I knew I wasn't able to get up yet because the music hadn't changed. They put this certain type of this tone, and now I know that it can be almost like a musical manipulation where it makes you feel sad or it makes you feel this. It gives you these feelings based on the tone of the music.
That's what they do in the movies.
Like what you do in a movie, right? You know a sad scene's coming up. You know a jump scare's coming up. You know you're supposed to be excited and happy. So you knew just by what the band was doing what was expected. So it was this extra form of control. And a lot of the time when you're getting these like goosebumps, or I felt like I wanted to cry sometimes in the worship songs. And Mum would say, that is the power of the Lord. And now I'm like, I think I just like live music. Like you just don't consider it could be anything else. So I was lying there at the age of 5 and praying with all my heart, you know, God, please come into my heart. Please save me, you know, because I'm petrified of hell and demons, and that is very traumatic for a child to be told that, oh yes, all those monsters are real. They're demons. They're whispering in your ears. Very, very traumatic. So lying there, you know, praying, and it was almost like a little movie screen turned on in my head, and I saw this image of like dirt floor and all these children, and I could tell they were, to me it looked like one of the 40-hour famine commercials, right? Just this little snippet of these children looking up at me and my hands in front of me. And I knew they were my hands, but they were obviously older. And it didn't last very long, but it was very, very clear. And I'm lying there going, did I just get a vision? Did I just get a vision from God? And that is accepted and promoted and wanted. Basically, it's a spiritual gift of prophecy. And when I woke up, I told the pastor, and we told my mum and said, you know, I've had this vision. I'm going to be a missionary, because that's the only option. Why would God give me a vision like this if I'm not going to go and preach to the masses over in countries that need Christianity, right?
Need God,
Which my grandparents did. They were missionaries throughout Papua New Guinea, India, Indonesia. So that's the knowledge I had. That's what I interpreted as, I'm going to be a missionary. I then had another vision later on, I think I was about 8, where I was on a stage talking to a lot of people. I'm also going to be a preacher, obviously. That is my life path. So I'm thinking I've got these 2 key visions from God about my future. And this is, you know, my spiritual path that I am on. So I was very, very serious about my religion. Very serious. You know, I've had this proof. How could I not be? So I was head first in the church. Then we get to high school. High school's a bit tough. I went to a private Christian college. So again, all my friends are Christian. It was science averse. So we didn't learn evolution. Evolution is evil. Evolution is from the devil. That is what the devil has come and spoken into men's hearts to make them dismiss Christianity. That's the work of the devil. Do not ever look into evolution. You know, the world...
It's crazy. You're only 30 and that is still being taught. You know, like
Absolutely.
50 years ago, you can see that it has its place, but it would have been around. But
And I mean, this is going to affect a lot of people and their career choices from that school. And you pay a lot of money to go to that school. So school was interesting. I think I felt the normal teenage things that you want to do and experience, and I was really drawn to, you know, all these TV shows and movies that I wasn't allowed to watch. Our films were very heavily controlled, you know, PG, that's it. It had to, you know, even when I was really young, Snow White was like, no, there's a witch in that. You can't watch that. Snow White. Smurfs, that's got a warlock, that's witchcraft. Gargamel, evil, can't watch that. Right?
What about Harry Potter?
Oh my God, Harry Potter. No way. My mum was asked to, because my primary school wasn't Christian. We didn't have one close by. And my mum wasn't working, so the private one, which was my high school was also a primary school, wasn't an option at the time.
Yeah.
And my mum was asked by another Christian mum at the school to come down and basically protest the fact that they had Harry Potter in the library. And I remember going, oh, they have Harry Potter in the library. I think I was grade 4, maybe grade 5 when they came out. I'm thinking, I wonder if I can just read a little bit. And I remember reading it in secret in the library, but I wasn't allowed to. Like, it was I felt so much shame for that, especially because I liked it.
Yeah,
so I'm not supposed to like it. Yes. Also, I remember reading, Goosebumps under my friend's bed, and I loved it. My mum used to get phone calls in grade 3 that Hana was telling ghost stories at school, and she'd frightened some of the other kids really badly, and you need to have a talk to her.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, oh, sorry. I just really enjoy that. And that was wrong. Ghosts aren't real, spirits aren't real, that's demonic. So then I get to teenage life, and teenage life was really tough. I now know I have ADHD. I didn't know at the time, right? Obviously, girls were not diagnosed. There were no studies in girls. They didn't know the differences in girls and boys and the different types of ADHD, inattentive versus attentive, all of that. So I found school really, really hard. And I was clever, very clever. So it wasn't an issue of not knowing what I was doing. It was the overwhelm that came with it. I basically had chronic overwhelm. Why is everyone else doing this so easily? Why is this so hard for me? Why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? And that was the first thing I went to. What's wrong with me? And that developed a lot of things. I think that mixed with the guilt and shame from church, the excess responsibilities that come along with being in that church, the focus on image in the church, and the women that were on stage, they were beautiful, like gorgeous. All the women and the men dress very, very well. I can pick them out of a crowd now. I'm like, oh yeah, they go to church. They have a look about them. They all looked gorgeous, and they were all very in control of their looks, if that makes sense. So I started dyeing my hair blonde at the age of, I reckon, 12, wearing makeup in a way that you wouldn't get in trouble at school, and developed an eating disorder, which very quickly turned into self-harm as well, which, oh my gosh, that warred with me and my religious upbringing. Why am I doing this thing? This must be demons. This must be demonic.
How old are you at this point?
12, when they developed.
All of it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that lasted a very, very long time.
Yeah, okay.
Now, the church didn't believe in psychology.
Yeah, okay.
It was prayer counselling, basically. And my mum did the right thing. She did take me to a psychologist, a psychotherapist, like a full assessment at the Royal Children's Hospital. She was very, very concerned when she found out.
Yeah, yeah.
2 years later. So it had been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
So she did the right thing there, but it wasn't working. Nothing was working.
Is that because it was toying with like your foundational beliefs? And
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was just a lot of things that were just unaddressed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Unknown. And at that point, I didn't want to get better. This was my coping mechanism. Take away my coping mechanism, what am I left with?
Yeah, right.
So she ended up taking me to this other church. It wasn't our church. It was another church, and I thought that was because she didn't want anyone at church to know, which I don't think she did want anyone at church to know.
It's a double-edged sword.
But she took me to this other church where I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand. And I was about 14, and they all circled around me. Everyone placed their hands on me, and they prayed that the devil would release its hold on me. And I remember the woman who was leading this prayer circle, which felt like an exorcism. It was very commanding. Devil, you will leave this child alone, rah, rah, rah. It's very scary, especially people you don't know. And then to think, oh my gosh, do I really have a demon attached to me? Is this actually what's happening? And the woman that was leading it, she knew something. She knew about an area where, trigger warning again, I was self-harming. I had carved a word into my body that I believed about myself. And she knew that. And she couldn't have known, right? So that to me was...
It's not an invisible location.
Yes, exactly. It was... My mother didn't know. It was very secret. So to me, I was like, okay, that's proof that God gave her that. So this must be evil, right? Like, it was just this weird
makes
proof.
sense, though. Yeah, like you said, the proof's there. And
exactly. So I've had all these like little proof things, right? So then when I hit 15, my mum decided to leave my dad.
Right.
Now this blindsided everybody. So I remember I came out one night, she was sleeping on the couch, which was like so not on. If anyone was ever on the couch, it was my dad, because my mum had really bad neck problems and could never do the couch, and usually he was the one snoring. But suddenly she's on the couch, and I'm like, what's wrong? And I didn't know at the time. I am intuitive. I just picked up something was really, really, really wrong here, and I don't know what it is. So obviously, Mum must have cancer. She must be dying. That's the only logical explanation. And when I said that, she said, "Oh, no, sweetheart. Your father and I have just decided to separate." That was worse than Mum potentially having cancer, because how could you possibly do that? What's going to happen? That's not allowed. What do you mean? You guys are perfect. We're the perfect family. What do you mean?
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely shocking. I didn't know, but one of my mum's ex-boyfriends from before she was in the church had found her in the phone book, called her up and said, hey, I wanted to catch up. And she told my dad, she's like, oh, one of my ex-boyfriends, he's found me. I'd love to catch up. And she met with him and she was like, oh my, and he said to her, what have they done to you? Who are you? What is this? And it just shook her free from a lot of the cage she'd built around herself.
Yeah.
She couldn't describe that to me as 15 years old.
Yeah.
She was still processing it herself. Yeah. So all she knew is, he's right. This isn't me. I'm not happy. Still not happy. I could maybe be happy with him. So the fact that it was then seen as an affair, even worse.
Were they together?
She hadn't done anything, right?
Yeah.
But she was continuing to see him openly to Dad, I'm done with us. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah. I'm
going to see him.
Yeah.
And my dad then obviously was losing control of his perfect image.
Yeah.
So it was very, very, very traumatic. It was very messy.
Yeah. Worst
possible thing that can happen when you've already got a child that's self-harming and got an eating disorder, all of that. So that got worse.
Yeah.
And for a long time I was like, it's obviously because of me. I put too much pressure on the family.
Yeah.
And so then that got internalized as well. So there's all this internalized shame and guilt and all of that. Plus, if we're not a Christian family anymore, how am I going to go and be a missionary and a preacher with a broken family? That's not okay. Then it ramped up because all of the parents at church and everything started to find out. And my mum and I got kicked out of church.
Yeah.
So they pretty much said, Mum was on the women's ministry. And they just turned around and said, you don't think you guys can actually come back here? And Mum was like, oh, all right. I see what you're saying. So she was out, and then the fact that I was living with my mum, apparently I was living with sin. I was a teenage girl, I'm going to live with my mum. My dad doesn't talk periods. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And my dad was moving out to his sister's place in the country, way away from all my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still at school, and all of the other kids at school, especially the ones that went to my church, were told, you can't hang out with Hana anymore. Her family is broken. She's living in sin. She's a bad influence. Do not talk to her. Do not hang out with her. So that social, high school is hard enough. Mm-hmm. Add that onto it. I've lost my entire church community, family friends from that felt like family, actual family, because we didn't have much, right? So we did Christmases together, family holidays together, everything together. Gone instantly, turned their backs. No one checked in to see if I was okay. How you coping with the divorce? How you coping with this change of schools? Nothing. So I had to change schools because of it. It was so bad.
Did you go to a public school from there?
I went to it was a private school, but it was a Catholic school.
Yeah, okay.
And it didn't feel like a Christian school in any way. Yeah. Wildly different. Yeah. Everyone was like, oh yeah, our parents have been to church once a year.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean once a year? What?
Yeah.
Are they going to hell? It was this huge shift I had to then come to. So all of that, right? There's probably more in that story, but it was very messy. It was very hard. And I'm still, at the time, battling with, shouldn't I be back at church? Do I need to find a new church? Because I've got this spiritual pathway I'm going to.
Oh, yeah.
But then now I feel so broken, how could I ever get to that pathway?
Yeah.
This big sort of thing. So I just kind of went, you know what? Maybe I just forget about it all. Maybe I just push it down into a neat little box inside my brain and I don't open that. I lock it and just pretend it never happened. And I'm never going to be that. And maybe there's something else I have to think about. So I'm like, oh crap, what am I going to be? What am I going to be? That was a big question. So anyway, I go through life and just sort of figuring things out as you do. And by the time I got to 20, I'd had a few long-term relationships that hadn't worked out. They'd always cheated on me after 2 years or something like that. Again, solidifying the what's wrong with me aspect. Had this boyfriend that I was seeing. We travelled. We went over to Cambodia, and he ended up, we had a horrible falling out, and I sent him home. And then I came home from this, like, what was supposed to be a romantic trip to be like, no, we actually broke up. And I was really ashamed about it. Like, oh, people are going to think what's wrong with her again. And I thought, you know what? Stuff it. I'm just actually going to go back and I'm going to leave Australia. I don't actually want to be here anymore. I don't want anyone to know me, to know my history. I just need a fresh slate. So I went back to Cambodia because I'd really enjoyed it there. And I ended up working at a children's orphanage. And I was going to go there for 3 months. Went there, and one day when I was teaching, because I was teaching English, I turned around and realised it had a dirt floor, and all these children's faces are looking up at me. And I was like, oh my God, this is that vision that I saw. And even right now I'm getting shivers again. It was such a wild moment to think, I'd misinterpreted it. I'm not a missionary, but I am in another country and I'm helping these children, but it has nothing to do with God. What about the other one? What else have I misconstrued? I thought I had this power of prophecy, and then I thought I must have been dreaming it all the whole time because everything that happened, and I still wasn't sure by the end of getting kicked out, like, is the church real? Is Christianity real? Maybe I just don't like churches. Maybe God's still real. All those questions, and they continued for a long time. But suddenly I had this validation that, no, that experience was real. Just interpreted it wrong. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. Started following my gut a little bit more, which you have to do when you travel, and ended up moving to Canada. I was like, I'm still anti-Australia right now. I don't want to be around anyone who knows me. So I moved to Canada for 2 years to do a working holiday visa. Lived in like the most beautiful little Christmas town called Banff in Alberta, and met my husband, who just so happened to be from 2 suburbs away back home.
That's crazy.
With multiple mutual friends.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I don't want an Aussie. You're gonna know people.
Yes.
And he grew up kind of Catholic, similar, like, oh yeah, Dad would sometimes go to church, whatever. But it wasn't super ingrained. And he was very science-minded. Like, he had done university degrees in psychology and very, very clever. And anytime I said something, he would say, well, where's the published peer-reviewed article on that one? And he really made me stop and think and challenged a lot of my views and my beliefs, which was fantastic. And so I started researching because he was like, well, go find it. I was like, I can do that? He's like, yeah. And he'd say something about evolution. I'd be like, oh no, I have no idea. He'd say, I don't know, go teach yourself. So I found the Khan Academy, did a whole course on evolution, what it is, what it means. And my mind felt like it was just being like blasted open in terms of my worldview.
Yeah.
It was wonderful spending time with people.
I love those moments. How did I not think of that before? Exactly. I feel so not stupid, but stupid for not considering it. I love those moments.
Yes. And I started realizing, I guess, my feminist ideals that I had and how anti-feminist the church can be and rooted in patriarchy and what I didn't know what that word was before, and suddenly it's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So it's sort of this exploration of the real world, but the spiritual world hadn't really changed yet.
Yeah.
So then along those travels after Canada, I decided to go down to Louisiana, traveling by myself. We were still together, obviously, but I was traveling by myself. And I wanted to work in Louisiana because I always felt drawn to it. It's such a cool place. And I worked on this goat farm in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Town of 100. Middle of nowhere. And I was staying in a caravan out the back. And I think it was the first or the second night that I got there, I woke up with something called sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
I'd never had this before.
Yeah.
Now, usually sleep paralysis is where something's sitting on your chest and it's so heavy you can't get up. This felt like someone holding my wrists down on the bed, and I could move my head, I could move my chest, but I could not get up. And it felt terrifying. I went straight back into the church in my head. I was praying, by the time I could get up, I turned on all the lights, turned on my Christian music, and was just like, absolutely not. This must be demonic. What else could it be, right? That felt so evil. The next night, again, praying before sleep, God protect me, all of that. And I saw something sit on the bed, like the butt imprint of something sit down on the bed. Terrifying. Like, I didn't sleep. I was like, what am I doing? What is this? This place is haunted or something. I don't know what's going on. And so I told the girl, so she was like the grandchild of the people I was working for. I told her, I was like, I feel really silly saying this, but I have to know, has anyone ever said anything about staying out in that caravan? And she's like, oh, what have you brought with you from New Orleans? Didn't skip a beat. She believed me instantly. Didn't make me feel silly. And she said, no one said anything, so it must be attached to you. I was like, oh, that feels fantastic.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. My worst fear is confirmed. Fabulous.
And she said, my friend's a witch. I'll get him to come down.
Yeah.
And firstly, I was like, a witch?
Yeah.
Witches aren't real.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but in the church we believe they were real. Other things were real. They are real.
There's a demon here.
Yeah, it was this weird, like, is this okay? Is this
Civil.
wrong? Is this evil?
Yeah, yeah.
Secondly, what?
Yeah.
He's a witch. She goes, yeah, he's a witch and a nurse. And I was like, you are breaking open lots of gender biases in my brain. Fun fact, witch is a gender neutral term.
Oh, yeah.
So, just so everyone knows, even though we associate it with women. So, he comes along, comes into the room, did some divination using a pendulum. I didn't know what that was. I was just like, what is he waving this weird thing around for? Turns around and said, yep, there's something here. It is attached to you. What I can do is cleanse the space, ward it, which is like putting up a block, and you'll be fine. And I was like, I don't know what any of those words mean, but
do it.
Fine.
Yeah.
Try.
As long as nothing's touching me again. Yeah.
Because obviously me praying, it still sat on my bed like it didn't work.
Yeah.
So try this and we'll see. Anyway, that night, went to sleep. Lights on still.
Did you pray?
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard scraping on the roof, but nothing inside.
Yeah.
It felt like something was trying to get in and couldn't. Ooh. And in my head, I was like, at the time going, it's just a tree in the wind.
Yeah.
It's just a tree. And then, of course, when I left in the morning, I've turned around very slowly and I'm like, oh, there's no trees close enough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, at least I know it worked.
Yeah.
Right? It worked. That's interesting. Cool. File that away for later. So that was my first encounter with a witch and my first very spiritual encounter, like supernatural.
Yeah.
And looking back, I think that was less malevolent than I perceived at the time and more like this wake up. There is more here that you're made for and that you can experience and understand in the spiritual realm. So fast forward, now I'm watching Harry Potter all the time. Love Harry Potter. I'm diving deep into anything I want to read. Fantasy, witch novels, Anne Rice, like absolutely giving myself permission to explore and loving it. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I remember thinking, tea leaf reading could be fun. That could be fun, right? That's in Harry Potter. Surely that's nothing bad. I'm just going to brew a cup. I love tea. I'll brew a cup of tea and see if I can read the leaves. And in it, I accidentally predicted the conception and birth of my daughter. Didn't realize, luckily I kept a little record because I was like, oh, that's so funny. Like this arrival of, someone that we don't know but we're really close to and two fish. I think that means Pisces. I have no idea. I don't know anything about zodiacs. And we had a little girl we conceived about a month later. I thought I was infertile. We'd been trying for over a year. Conceived about a month later, and when I had her, she was Pisces. And I didn't realise till I looked back and I went, oh my gosh, looking back at that cup, that's my daughter. And I was like, do I have a gift here? Is this a thing? So again, allowing myself to dive a little bit deeper. So learning, a little bit more about tea leaf reading. As I'm sort of allowing this to happen, I hear this voice in my head, and I'm not kidding. I did think I was going crazy, but it was like this thought was dropped into my head saying, buy a deck of tarot cards. And I was like, ha, no way. That is evil. Do I want a demon popping out? Do I want a portal to hell opening up? Absolutely not. No way. And so I ignored it, and it was almost like it was getting louder until I actually told my husband, I said, I feel like I need to buy a deck of tarot cards, like something's telling me to. He said, okay, so go do it. I can't do that. No, don't you understand? He's like, all right, so don't do it. I'm like, no, I feel like I have to.
Men, my husband does that.
So he wasn't a help at all.
No.
It took, I reckon, about a year of me, formulating this. I think the voice had started after the tea leaf reading before my daughter. So I think it took birth to really allow me to just explore. Yeah. So I did. I went and bought a deck of tarot cards, and I have never gone a day since without using them. Mm-hmm. They opened up this world that I hadn't, it just flowed so easily. A lot of people, it is difficult to learn. I feel like I barely had to learn. Within a couple of months, I was offering, I'd obviously done myself and my husband, and then very hesitantly asked my mum because she was going through something else. Like, I think I can help her, but how do I tell her I'm using these things that are evil?
Yeah.
and told her, and she came and sat down with a notepad, took notes and listened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually helping. And then I'd offer some friends going through some issues, and then I ended up going online and finding a Facebook group where I was like, I want to practice. Anyone who wants a reading, don't care where you are in the world, just tell me a question and I'll pull some cards. And I'd do 20, 30 readings a day for people online on the internet for free.
Yeah.
And all I got was positive feedback. Like, how did you know that? This is the most incredible reading I've ever had. And I was like, what is going on here? And so we'd had my daughter, I was on maternity leave, and at the same time going through postnatal depression. Now, these tarot cards were actually helping with that, giving me something to focus on, but also some really good coping mechanisms. I was meditating daily, which really, really helped. I was medicated as well, because that's necessary. So I'm going through all of that. I'm getting better. But something is not right. I'm not happy. And I thought having a baby and going on maternity leave would be the best. It's like, this is going to be amazing.
Lots of people think that, but it's not for everyone.
Absolutely not. Well, I'd only had the church, right? Where it was this glorified, that is what women do. That is what we're here to do, to have children. And to have a baby and then go, I hate this, what have I done? Was brain rattling. Like, how do you begin to cope with the mum guilt that comes along with that thought?
But that's not like, that's the depression.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a true...
Exactly. It's also the ADHD
Yeah.
of, I can't cope, this is overwhelming. I don't have the coping mechanisms for this.
Yeah.
And, you know, my other ones are not okay. Like, what do I do here? And then having a husband in the Air Force, he was away.
Yeah, isn't that crap? I had that conversation with one of my girlfriends the other day.
Oh my gosh. So I was left alone for a lot of that time with no adult communication most of the time. So a baby all day for 4 months, recipe for disaster. So there was a lot of things going on there. In the end, though, I ended up finding astrology somewhere along that way and started, it piqued my ADHD hyperfixation. I started looking into it, reading into it, and discovered that my moon, so for everyone listening, we all have not only your sun sign, which is your star sign, that's where the sun was in the zodiac at the time of your birth. The moon goes through each of the zodiac signs every 2.5 days. So we all have a moon sign, and that's our emotional landscape. Now, my moon is in Scorpio, which firstly, very intense emotional sign, very related to huge ups and huge downs, huge transformations in your life, very, very low lows, very, very high highs. And I was like, well, that relates with my life completely. Lots of, rebirth, redoing your life over, start afresh. Like, yeah, that tracks. But it was in the 10th house. Now, houses are like the area of life. The 10th house is career. And the interpretation with that is, without a career, your emotions are untethered and you will not feel validated, you will not feel fulfilled, and your mental health will suffer. And I was like, whoa, yeah, I'd been a bit of a workaholic and now I have nothing. A baby is not my job, And even though I thought I want maternity leave for as long as possible, suddenly I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should go back to work. So I decided to go back part-time, and suddenly my mental health went like through the roof. I'm feeling so much better. And I was like, okay, cool. That's great. Wow, that worked. That's really interesting. What more can I learn? So I started diving in deeper and deeper, also using these tarot cards, realizing I'm helping people. And then the opportunity came to move to Perth. And I thought, I don't know anyone in Perth. I can be anyone in Perth. And I'd said to my husband, I was like, I think I want to open my own business. And he's like, do it. What are you going to do? I was like, tarot reading and astrology. And he's like, do it. Absolutely. You're allowed to. Give it a go. Best time to do it. I was like, okay, cool. So I did. And that is just, I guess, the start of it, is how things started to really fall into place. I got a mentor. I realized that I am very, very psychic, as are we all. We all have those access to those abilities, just in varying degrees, and we have different specialities. And all of these sort of skills that I'd learned were really, really helping people. My fulfillment went up. Decided to dye my hair pink, which I'd always wanted to do, and it was not allowed.
It looks amazing.
Thank you. No one in the church has pink hair.
So. I love that everything's pink though. Hannah's wearing pink earrings, pink glasses, pink lipstick, pink blush, pink hair. Like, it's just fabulous.
Yep, absolutely. And I decided to call my business Suburban Witchery, because I lived in the suburbs, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't this like witch in the woods, that people go and see. I wasn't this like really urban, I guess, vibe. It was suburban. I was an everyday mum, right? Doing everyday mum stuff. But I can also help with my witchy tools, which is, like, hey, this crystal's really good for this, and this tarot card reading can help with that, and your astrology can help you find your career, and it helped me find mine. And it's, it's written in my chart. I'm an Aquarius rising. It's very much about astrology being a part of my role that I'm here to play. I'm here to spread a message to a lot of people. Like, there's all these really intricate things in the chart that just point me to where I am. And delving into, I guess, witchcraft, which I was so scared of that word for so long. I used to say, I'm a little bit witchy. Yeah, I'm just a bit witchy. Like, I like my herbs and herbal healing and, tea leaf reading, and then that can maybe give us some information. And then sort of realizing that a lot of this was quite witchy, and someone said, are you a witch? And I was like, I don't know, maybe. And it took a long time to own that word because it comes with a lot of trauma, not just from the church, but from society. Yeah. Right? And I had to really think, what do I think a witch is? And I'm like, I think a witch is a person who takes back their own power, chooses their own way, and doesn't rely on an outside authority figure or organisation to tell them what to believe. Mm-hmm. I believe what I believe based on my own experiences. So it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of, people saying, oh, there's, Lemurian starseed things. And I'd look into it. So it's like, I'm open-minded, I'm just checking it out. And I'd be like, you know what? It's not for me. Mm-hmm. That I don't feel it in my gut. But when someone talks to me about spirit guides and having a team like our ancestors on the other side, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. I've definitely had like communication from them in dreams. I've definitely had guidance in the way of signs around me. Yes, that feels like a part of my spiritual understanding of the world. And the witchy side as well of just leaning into the seasons and the way they change and the different marks, things like the winter solstice, the shortest night of the year, longest night of the year, shortest day of the year. Leaning into that and recognizing it. Before that, I never even noticed it existed. What? I was not in flow with the world at all. Now I'm like, I understand the flow and the cycles that we go through every year annually, every month with the moon. So the lunar month, the year, these cycles like the equinoxes when things are in balance, and why they take us through certain cycles at certain times to help with our own development. Like it is just like this rush of knowledge that just suddenly everything makes sense, And so now this is what I do full time for a career. I'm professional witch, not in terms of like I do spells for people.
Yeah, well, that was when you say professional witch. I know that that's not everything, but that is the first place. Yeah. Like, not over a cauldron, but reciting like some form of a poem kind of thing and cursing someone who's pissed you off.
It could be, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of what I do, I guess it is crafting things with intent for myself. But for my clients, it is sometimes helping them craft a ritual to let go of someone. Right? Because the essence of ritual, and church is very ritualistic, incredibly so, is it sets you into a different mind space. And sometimes you need a tool to visualize this, thing happening. So whether it is, I don't do it on behalf of people, but I'll advise them like, hey, you've just gone through this horrible breakup with someone that was extremely toxic and abusive, and you can't stop thinking about them, right? You don't want to be tied to them forever. So potentially consider something like a cord cutting ceremony or ritual, right? What it's going to do is you're imagining and you're visualizing severing this energetic cord with this person. You may want to do that by having 2 candles lit, and you imagine you as one and them as the other, and they're tied together and the candles burn through that cord, and that helps you visualize the act of what's happening, right? Same ways that people burn their ex's clothes in a trash can. That is witchcraft. Saying no is a spell, right? There are so many different ways. Words, spelling, that is spells. So I think the intent behind what we do becomes our form of witchcraft. And it's just that form of power and control that we take over our lives. Rather over the lives of other people. If that makes sense. So, the services that I do, I provide astrology readings for people, astrology reports. I do one that is a kids astrology report. So it's for kids under the age of, basically 11 would be, I guess, the top, 11, 12. Because after that, they're probably more on the adult one. But the kids ones are made for parents. And so they are, hey, your kid has this in their chart, which means ordinary ways of motivating them are not going to work. Like my kid, she has a Pisces Mars. If I tell her to hurry up, there's the quickest way to get her to slow down and stop what we're doing, right? She is not motivated
Yeah.
by me saying hurry up.
Yeah.
I need to be very time aware with her because she has zero concept of time and is not motivated that way. She's motivated by things that are magical and things that are helping people. Like, hey, it would really help me right now if we got into the car. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
and she'll
yeah.
be like, yeah, sweet, I'd love to help you, Mum.
Yeah,
Jump in the
right.
car,
Yeah.
right? If I'm like, hurry up, we've got to get in the car. No, done.
Yeah, yeah.
So little things like that might be really interesting for your kid. How they learn. We look at their Mercury sign. How do they learn best, right? Not all kids learn the same way. We all know this.
Yeah.
Imagine you had this like little cheat sheet on how your kid learns, right? So that's what I've crafted that one for because I think it's really useful for parents.
Yeah.
The other one's the adult one, so that's figuring out your own career, your own parts of your personality that, you know, we often forget who we are because society conditions us a certain way. It's what happened to Mum in the church. What happened to me in the church. I never had a chance to develop my own identity until after the age of 21, right? I should have been allowed to explore that as a kid, and it was just always shut down. So everything I liked was wrong, which is very hard to deal with. So yes, so I find astrology is almost like permission to be who you are.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Tarot is fantastic for decision making. If you feel stuck, giving you guidance on where to go.
Yeah.
What might be the cause of feeling stuck?
Yeah.
Right. What area of your life is doing that? Because we can't always see when it's that close to us.
Yeah.
So that's that aspect. And then the other thing I do is help people tune into their psychic abilities and learn those psychic abilities. So I have a course on that.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a wonderful thing once you figure out what works for you and how these things come through to you.
Yeah.
You know, some people are really heavily visual, so
Yeah.
they'll receive visions like I do. Other people, I've got one student particularly, and she didn't realise till she went through my course that she's got clairgustance. That is her strongest psychic skill. That is the ability to taste things that are not there.
Oh, wow.
So let's say I did a psychic exercise. I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold up a card. You can't see what's on it. And I want everyone to tune in and see what you pick up.
Yeah.
Whether that's a colour, a feeling, a scent, something like that. Just tell me what you think. And she would always get, you know, this side of my tongue is tingling. I relate that to something sweet. It feels tart. I think there's apples on there.
Yeah.
Right? And there'd be apples on the card.
Oh, wow.
I'd do another one where I'm like, I'm drinking a tea. I want everyone to try and guess what's in the tea. And she'd be like, oh, this section of my tongue, I think that's the bitter section, because we ended up having to go through and find out where the sections of the tongue were, where it was giving her information. She goes, I think that's the bitter section. And I'm also seeing like this new sprout with a little yellow flower. Bitter, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, well, it's dandelion root.
Yeah.
It is it's a bitter herb.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the herb, the root part is bitter. But dandelion is the first flower of the season that pops up. And the fact that she saw that was fantastic. I'm like, you got all that information. It could have been anything. It could have been drinking anything, and you got that. That's very, very, very good. So now she tunes into things with her taste and with her sense in her mouth.
Yeah.
We use all of them at different times, but we'll usually have one that is stronger than another. So figuring out what works for them is part of the fun and the magic in that, I guess. But yeah, I think my whole life now feels so much more aligned, in control, less swayed by other people's thoughts and opinions.
Yeah.
Because I've seen what that does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is my journey.
That's amazing. I find that really like eye-opening, particularly the witchcraft part. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, that was I loved hearing about you talk about being in alignment. That's definitely something that I struggle with, and I know lots of mums struggle with it postpartum, having children and losing themselves and not feeling like they even know what to do. So that is so exciting. Thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me and being open-minded to explore these sometimes touchy topics as well.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it's all very interesting and very exciting. I'm going to finish with a quick this or that.
Okay.
So tea or coffee?
Tea.
Wine or spirits?
Spirits.
Day or night?
Night.
Summer or winter?
Summer in Australia,
Yeah.
but although this is going to be my first Queensland summer, so I don't know. That might change. The winter here was phenomenal. However, if we're in Canada, winter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's no. Movies or books?
Books.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
Okay.
I just feel like I need a caveat because I've kind of promoted Harry Potter a little bit. That, like, JK is dead to me.
Oh, okay. Yes. We have touched on Harry Potter a little bit, quite a bit through the podcast. But
I'm very cognizant now of trying not to purchase anything and send money that way because the harm there has been significant, unfortunately. However, if anyone does love Harry Potter and doesn't want to promote J.K. Rowling or their things, there is a fan fiction I can highly recommend.
Oh, okay then.
It's called All the Young Dudes.
Yeah.
It's online on a website called Archive of Our Own.
Yep.
And it's about the Marauders, so it's about Harry's Harry's dad.
Oh, okay.
And making the Marauders map and everything is hands down, it's way better than Harry Potter.
Oh.
Hands down, one of the best books I've ever read. I'm reading it for the 3rd time this year.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
okay.
It's so good. So yes, listen to that. Or you can find it on YouTube as well as an audiobook.
Yeah.
That is my recommendation.
Fantastic. That was great. Alrighty then. Well, thank you so much. We'll wrap it up there.
Thank you.